Welcome to the Once Upon a Sketch podcast. I'm Wilson Williams Jr.
And I'm Norman Grock.
In our podcast series, we'll be presenting interviews, insights, education, and news about the many facets of the children's illustration market, from children's books to character design, storyboarding, toys, and licensed products. We'll use our quest for knowledge to help educate you on your journey to success. Our guest today began his illustration career in 1991. He worked for Lauria Toy Corporation, Scrambled Eggs Production, and Goldman Toy Group before striking out on his own in 2001 to establish his own company to successfully work for various popular licenses and properties. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our pleasure to introduce to you our guest, Chris Lauria.
Oh, thank you very much.
Good afternoon, man. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
How are things holding up for you out there in New Jersey?
Pretty good. The weather's been fantastic, and so far so good. We're hanging in there.
Well, Chris, when we say that you've worked with various popular licenses, in no way are we understating. You've done work for Star Wars, The Simpsons, Pokemon, Voltron, Spider-Man, Indiana Jones, G.I. Joe, Dora the Explorer, Disney, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. I mean, man, that's freaking amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Did you ever imagine you'd get to work with that level of licensed properties in your career?
No, I had no idea I'd be working in the toy industry.
Well, then go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to work in the toy industry.
I got into the toy industry by accident, purely by accident. As a kid, I grew up, loved to draw. I guess what really drove me to draw every day, I saw Star Wars. 1977 movie came out. My dad took me. I think I was 8 years old, and he says to this day, he says, "I'll never forget when I took you to the movie. It looked like something snapped in your brain." So, and ever since that day, I was always drawing. Drawing Star Wars characters, then drawing my own characters, just drawing all the time. And then, through grade school, when I got to high school, I knew from fourth grade on, I told my mom, I said, I want to be an artist. I want to do something. I didn't know what it was. I just knew I wanted to do something in art. I kind of pictured myself as, say, a comic book illustrator or a cartoonist, but I had really no idea exactly where I would fall into. And she was great. She would promote that and help me in any way she could. When I got to high school, I had a fantastic art teacher in high school who recognized right away that I really wanted to do this, and I was studying this. I was passionate about it, so she pushed me really hard, and she had a great art program. For a high school level, it was amazing, as far as all the fundamentals and the basics and things, even down to like color theory and anatomy and perspective and letter form. She would teach all that at a high school level.
Wow.
So then when I went to art school, I went to the Art Institute in Philadelphia into their graphic design program because, again, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was looking at comic book illustration. In fact, I paid a visit to the Joe Kubert School when I was searching out schools. But my mom kind of felt it was too specialized. So she kind of thought maybe you should get a little more of a broader art education and then find out what you could do from there. So, and that made more sense. I said, you're right. So I went to the Art Institute in Philly, and I took graphic design because I figured, their illustration program I wasn't impressed with. They had a point, I guess, at around fourth quarter. At that time, it was an accelerated program of 8 quarters, which was 2 years. At fourth quarter, you could transfer to illustration if you were recommended by an instructor. Amazingly, no instructors recommended me for illustration. So I'm not sure to this day why my classmates looked confused and said, wait a minute, you draw better than most of the guys in the illustration group. Why? I said, you know what, I don't care. I can learn more in the graphic design program. There's nothing in illustration that they can teach me that I can't figure out on my own anyway. So I stuck through the graphic design program, but one thing I did was I didn't want to graduate with a student portfolio. I wanted to have actual work under my belt before I graduated. So I was pretty persistent to the point of annoying with student services. So even at fourth quarter, I was down there bugging them for freelance jobs. They would get freelance jobs come into the school, and they would put them in a booklet. And usually it was the 7th and 8th quarter students would migrate down there and look through and see if there are any jobs to pick up. But I was down there in fourth quarter bugging the hell out of them. So the guy down there got to know me pretty well. So whenever a new job came in, he would call me first. He would call me before he called the 8th quarter students and say, Chris, I know you're hungry. I know you want to work. And he would throw these freelance jobs at me. So I was doing everything. I was doing caricatures. I was doing portraits, book illustrations, a little bit of everything, just because I wanted real work in my book when I graduated. So when I graduated school, they got a contact in. It was a job for toy design at Lauria Toy Company in Philadelphia. And sure enough, he called me first. He called me at home, said, got a job in here, says, toy design, toy company in Philly. Are you interested? And they said they want someone who's real into like Dungeons and Dragons, fantasy illustration. And I said, oh, okay. I said, I don't know anything about toys, but I'll go check it out. And I went on the interview, and I had a lot of comic book illustration in my book, along with my schoolwork. And the guy who interviewed me, his name was Bill Rucci. He was the head of R&D, and he was a real comic book fan. So I think when I showed him my comic book stuff, he loved it. So he said, start tomorrow. And this was a Friday, the interview, so he had me come in Saturday to start. So I said, okay, I'm not doing anything. I'll be in tomorrow morning. And that was it. He had me doing a little bit of everything. I was doing product sketches. I was doing some package layouts. He quit shortly after and went to another company, and I was kind of solo back there in their art department. I basically was the art department, and I had no idea what I was doing, and they were throwing everything at me. I was doing setting up for photo shoots. I was setting up the showroom at Toy Fair. I was doing package. I was doing product stuff. I was fixing models, sculpted models they had come in from China that were broken. They had me fix models, and it was a real learning experience because 1991, 92, they had just done their first year of Super Soakers. And if you remember, that was a huge breakthrough product.
Yeah.
So that was a company that was a small company that suddenly had a multi-million-dollar product on their hands, and they were trying to keep up. I mean, they couldn't make them fast enough. It was kind of a good time to be there. They were growing exponentially. They had tons of work. There was plenty to do, and because it was a small company, I had to do a little bit of everything. Anything they would throw at me.
It sounded like you had to do almost everything.
I was doing illustration. I was like package illustration. I was doing photo shoots. I was setting up the showroom. You name it, cleaning the art department. I mean, I was hiring, I was ordering supplies, I was keeping things stocked. It was crazy. We were working, we had studios that we would farm work out to. I was overseeing them, coordinating some of that work. So it was art direction, it was, actual hands-on. And at that time, this was all before computers, so everything was paced up,
Wow.
Were you still in school at that point?
No. I graduated in 91.
Okay.
That's amazing. That's a great learning. I mean, you were beating that learning curve, with a belt, man. Because there's so much integral, important information that was really setting you up and giving you the foundation for all the later work that you would do and get, and eventually being able to establish your own company.
Yeah, so the toughest part of it was that there was no mentor there. My mentor, the guy who hired me, left 2 months later. So I really didn't have any examples to look to. I didn't have anyone to ask a question of how am I supposed to do this? That was the hardest part. So a lot of what I was doing at Laramie was primarily packaging because I didn't have product education. They were using outside guys to do a lot of the product work. Every once in a while, I would get to draw up some squirt guns or some, I draw a handle for this new Super Soaker. I wasn't getting to do the full-blown product design because I didn't know how to do it. So I was doing mostly packaging and illustration work for packaging. From there, what happened was I was getting to know the studios that we worked with who dealt primarily in the toy industry. So there were a lot of studios. They were packaging studios. We would farm work out to them. So I would get to know those studios. And then as I got to know them, one studio in particular, he kept bugging me to come work for him. So I finally quit Laramie and went to work for him to do packaging. And it turned out to be one of the worst jobs I ever had in my life. And I was working like 80 hours a week on salary. And it was just a terrible environment, working like a dog. This went on for about 5 months. I said, I got to get out of here. And at that point, he was taking a vacation and was closing the office for a week. And I said, I gotta find a job in a week. So those nights, late nights prior to this week off, I knew was coming up. I was putting my portfolio together, and then I started putting all the feelers out and set up a whole string of interviews that entire week. And I said, no matter what, I got to get a job before this week's done, because I don't know how I'm going to interview with him back in the office. He's going to know I'm interviewing, and if I have to take off to go and interview, and then he's just going to fire me. So I set up a whole bunch of interviews, and then finally that Friday, at the end of the week, my last interview, I got a job. And it wasn't a full-time job, but they said, we'll have you come in to work freelance. I went to the interview expecting to do packaging. This particular studio, Scrambled Eggs, they did packaging and product design. And I didn't realize at that time they did product design. I went in there for a packaging job. I figured, okay, maybe I can get a packaging job. I just got to get out of this job I'm at. And when I went in there and interviewed before and had kind of known them a little bit, they said, look, you draw really well. Would you rather do product design? And I said, oh, I didn't know that was an option. I said, I don't know anything about product design, but if you can teach me, I'll learn it, and we'll go from there. And they said, okay. They said, we're going to have you work with our guy in the back. He's a great guy. This guy named Don Amadio. And him and I are still friends today. But so I started working there with Don, and Don knew what he was doing. He was much more schooled in product design than I was. So he was kind of showing me the technical ends of things, what to do, what not to do, how to approach something, and he was really my mentor. Finally, I had a mentor, to show me how to do things the right way. So, and I was primarily working on boys' toys, action figures, the fun stuff there, and it was a blast. I loved all the stuff I got to work on. That was really when I got, hit the ground running, doing nothing but product design. And they weren't sure they were going to need me full time, but it turned out to be full time every day for several years I was there. So, and it was great. Like I said, I was doing. That's where I learned, how to do turnarounds and control art, and how things are molded, how things are made, mechanisms, pivot points, all that technical stuff with the toys. I really got my education there as far as the hardcore product design. So, and that's what kind of springboarded me on, But again, getting into the toy industry, I never even knew it was a career path when I was in art school. I had no idea. So, but it married well. Comic illustration doesn't pay that great. I had done some comic illustration for some independents, and you really got to do a lot of work for a very little bit of money.
You ain't kidding.
It's tough, but at the same time, the comic illustrators, you got to draw everything. You're not just drawing a cool-looking dude. You're drawing a building and a car and a telephone and a coffee maker. You're drawing everything. So those guys are very, very well-rounded illustrators, especially the good comic illustrators. So that kind of foundation, I think, helps a lot, when I was going into toys, because drawing character design, you're drawing backgrounds, environments, vehicles, everything. So it's a lot of the same skills, and again, that skill set lent itself real well to toy design. The guys at Scrambled Eggs knew that it would, and they were right. I kind of fell into it, and it felt real natural. Not to mention, too, you read a lot of comic books, and I'm a huge comic book fan. I've got thousands of them in my closet. When we were doing a lot of work for Toy Biz, and it was all Marvel superhero stuff. And whenever we get those jobs in, they knew they said, "Give it to Chris. He's all about the characters." And that's a big part of it too. You got to know the licenses. You got to, you have to understand what these characters do, what they're about, and then translate that into toys. I mean, that's a huge part of it.
So you were working with those guys for about 10 years, where you were at an actual go to work every day, clock in, clock out job, correct?
About 3. That interim job for about 5-6 months. I was at Scrambled Eggs for about 2.5 years. From Scrambled Eggs, that's when I went to work for Goldman Toy Group. He was a startup. We were doing inventing as well as the contract work. Excuse me. So that was a little mix of both. We were doing some of the same thing I was doing before, contract work for the manufacturers, but we were also inventing, coming up with our own concepts and trying to sell them and license them to major manufacturers. So that's a whole different animal as well. Those are your kind of 2 main areas of the toy industry as far as product design, inventing, and contract. So we were doing a mix of both. And some success, it's tough. Inventing is extremely competitive. There's a lot of risk versus reward. You're investing a lot when you're coming up and selling your own concepts, but then at the same time, if you sell something in and it does well, you can do real well, especially those royalty checks. So I was with him for about, I want to say 3.5, almost 4 years, and then what had happened was, and this is, I guess, getting to some of your other questions as far as how I ended up on my own. One of the products that we had placed, the company that we had placed it with folded, but we owned everything. We owned the patents, we owned the packaging, we owned the trademark, everything. Because we had done it all for this company. So the product was on the shelf and selling, and the company folded. Everything reverted back to us. And the retailer still wanted to keep ordering it. So they contacted us and said, "We want to order more of these. Are you the guys we order from?" So what happened? We became a manufacturer by default. And the guy I worked for wanted to keep doing that. He said, "Well, gosh, let's just fill their orders." So he started going the route of a manufacturer, and as he went down that road, he kind of felt, I think this is what I want to do. I want to fold up shop on the inventing and the contract work. So he laid me off, and the other guy that was working under me, basically the art department. And but he said, whatever you do, if you want to continue working with these clients, I'm not going to stop you. That's fine. So I went home. I said, all right, I guess I'm going to get some unemployment. Let me just contact these people and see what happens. So I called up the clients and I said, look, I can do the same work for you. I'm just going to do it from my home office. How are you with that? And just about all of them said, that's fine. So I was doing the work anyway. It didn't matter. So to them, it really didn't matter where I worked from or who I worked for. They just said, as long as you do the work, we're good with that. So I kind of ended up working for myself by accident, really. It was something I wanted to do and thought about doing, but I just needed that kick in the behind to go do it. So it's a big step. You don't know what's going to happen, but I had a bit of a client base to start with, and I think that's really what got me over the hump. So, it's pretty scary. You don't know, am I going to be able to pay the rent next month? So that was 11 years ago, and so far, I keep my fingers crossed, so good. So a lot of guys, getting out of the gate, I think, is the hardest part. But I had that client base underneath me to start with, and that's what did it. So,
how much has that client base expanded since you've been on your own? Are you still working with that primary nexus of clients, or has it grown substantially?
Grown a lot, but it also changes and shifts. You end up finding that some clients you work with, maybe the company changes direction, or maybe that product manager moves to another company with different types of products, and you don't get calls from them anymore. So, you have clients you work with a lot for a while, and, maybe you have a good run with them for a few years, and then it changes, but you pick up a new client, and so your client base is always kind of morphing a little bit. Companies get bought and sold. That changes things dramatically. Mostly what happens is people move around, and those are your open doors, basically, your contacts within a company. If they move around, you might end up getting to work for a new company where they land, but at the same time, that old company you're working with, you don't have that connection to anymore unless you're working with someone else there. So it shifts around a lot. But I was fortunate, I was working with a lot of guys in Toy Biz, and when Toy Biz, they didn't fold up, what happened was Marvel essentially gave their master toy license to Hasbro. Toy Biz was their in-house toy company, essentially, but they decided to go and give it to Hasbro, and then Toy Biz really became the licensor approval department for Marvel licensed products. But all those guys lost their jobs, but some of them landed at other companies. A bunch of people I worked with landed at Fisher-Price brands in New York City, and then one guy in particular that I had a real good relationship landed at Hasbro. And prior to that, I hadn't really worked with either one of those companies. And then all of a sudden, I got a call from Fisher-Price and I got a call from Hasbro. So that's how I got into those companies. They said, "We love what you did for us at Toy Biz. Can you do that for us here? And, do that for us at Hasbro." So it changes. Toy Biz, that work went away, but then I got Fisher-Price and Hasbro. So it's constantly evolving and changing.
So what tools do you use to market yourself to keep your name fresh out there?
Primarily, let me see. Basically, I have a portfolio page on Coralflat.com, and I have a page on DeviantArt as well, but primarily Coralflat as far as self-promotion, and then essentially. Just kind of touch base with my clients every once in a while, see how they're doing, kind of check in with them. I don't do a lot of self-promotion. Fortunately, I haven't had a big need to do a lot of it, which is good. I know a lot of guys do a lot of that, and they spend a lot of time on it. I've been lucky enough that my client base has been steady enough, and that network usually expands from jobs that I haven't had to do a lot of hardcore self-promotion. So, like I say, Coralflat, I would say primarily. Secondary would be DeviantArt, and then, just kind of network with people online, like you guys. I found you guys through LinkedIn. I'm sorry, I use LinkedIn as well. And, the blog through LinkedIn, and just kind of chat with people, and you start meeting people. So that seems to be the three that I've used mostly.
Have you ever considered using a paid portfolio site?
I've looked at them. I haven't found the real need, only because, again, a site like Coralflat's free. I put my stuff up there really as a placeholder. I needed something online. I wanted to just be able to send people a link. Hey, you want to look at my stuff? Here's a link. Go to this page. Until I got a website. So I was kind of working at home on a website, but I'm not a web designer, and I was, using one of those, like iWeb or something on my Mac to kind of throw a page together. But I'm not real savvy about that stuff. So, and I kept second-guessing myself as far as my own website design. But while I was doing that, I was getting all these calls from the Coralflat. I was getting tons of contacts from real clients through Coralflat, and a number of big companies have contacted me through there that have turned into regular clients. So I haven't felt that, geez, I got to go out and pay to do this when Core has basically given me a ton of work, and then my existing network. I get most of my work through my existing network, and then some additional clients through CoreFlat. So, I've seen, there are some nice sites out there. I just haven't found the real need to go and pay a monthly fee to do that.
Oh, that's good. That saves you money. I know that you mentioned earlier when you were at some of the earlier companies that you worked for about you setting up booths and things at Toy Fair and stuff like that. Do you attend conferences and things of that nature to help with the networking or to see what's going on in the industry or what's new on the market in any way?
Yeah, I go to Toy Fair every year, the New York show in February. Years ago when I worked at Goldman Toy Group, we would go to E3, the video game conference. We went to that a couple years in a row when that was in Atlanta. And then we would go to the licensing show, which was at New York as well. And, of course, Toy Fair. But since I've been on my own, really just Toy Fair, and then I'll go to the comic conventions, the Philly show and the New York show. I did go to San Diego once. That was a fun experience, to say the least. Toy Fair has shifted dramatically from even 10, 12 years ago. It was the event to go to, the New York show, for years. At one point, years and years ago, it was 2 weeks long, and it was a week long. We used to go for a whole week. And now what's happened is, in the toy industry, Toy Fair in New York used to be the time when the companies would show off their new items and place their sales with the buyers. But what's happened is the large buyers, the big buyers, Toys R Us, Walmart, Kmart, they wanted to place their orders sooner. And they were meeting with the companies earlier on in October. And the manufacturers, especially the larger manufacturers and the big buyers, they were doing all that order placement in October, months before the February show. So when February rolled around, they were done. And you need to spend all this money to set up a big showroom and show off here at Toy Fair. We're done. And what's happened is the February show has become really more of a show that is specialized to it's the specialty toy market. A lot of the mom and pop shops, the smaller buyers, the big companies are still there. They have a presence there, but they put more of their emphasis now. There's a Dallas show in October, and that's where they place their emphasis. So what's happened for me as a designer, I used to go to Toy Fair to meet new clients and, show my book, obviously talk with people I'm working with, see what's going on, but the big deal was to try and get new clients. Now, because the show has been scaled back, what you find is the companies, to cut costs, they don't send everybody to the show. They just send the sales reps. So when I go to a particular booth or, showroom, the design directors, the creative directors aren't there. They're not. And you can't meet them like you would years ago. Years ago, you would go and everybody was there. Everybody you worked with, everyone you knew, you go, hey, is so-and-so here? Yeah, come on in. You schedule appointments. They were there. Now they're not there. Some of the smaller companies, they need every man on board. But, the mid-size and up, those people aren't there at the show. So you're not getting to speak directly with the one you want to. And that's been difficult. So for me, it's really to just kind of meet up with people I'm already working with, see what's going on, see if there's any kind of trend, anything that's, breaking through, what's going on in the industry, information gathering primarily. Every once in a while I might make a new connection or, even maybe make a new client, but not like I did years ago. It's a different show now. So, but I go to Toy Fair for that purpose. I go to the comic shows to see what's hot. What are some of the trends in pop culture generally, and then also I look around for artists, anyone who might be able to help me out. with overflow. And I look at the comic book illustrators, again, because that skill set, I think, lends itself well to toy design. So I've had limited luck. Found guys online, not necessarily at the comic shows, as far as comic artists. I've had better luck online than at the show, but, it is what it is. I still go there and check things out. And now you see toy companies will represent themselves at the comic book shows, the bigger shows. So I can kind of meet and greet with people I work with in the toy industry at a comic book show, which is kind of fun. So,
wow.
Do you follow any websites or magazines or anything like that to keep up with trends?
Some magazines, not much, just because I just hate accumulating all this magazines. The magazines at Toy Fair. There's, I think a site I would go to a lot to get news. There's action figure sites that I'll check out. Michael Crawford's his reviews. But again, that stuff's geared more toward collectors, the action figure collector guys. So it's not always a good pulse on the toy industry in general. So I guess there's a few news sites here and there I kind of check out, but not generally. A lot of times what I'll do is I go to the toy stores and go to Toys R Us, go to Target, go to Walmart, and you can really get a better sense as to what's hot and what's not by just going to the toy stores. A lot of times the magazines and things like that, they'll flower things up because they're almost like advertisements. It's not necessarily what's going to sell, it's just what they think's going to sell. So you go to Amazon, you can check out what are the best sellers, in the various toy categories, and you can get a sense. You can see what sells hot online, and then you can go into the big retailers and get a real good sense as to what's doing well at retail. So, and then I go to Newsarama and stuff to keep up on movies, comics, things like that. Things that are doing well.
Awesome. So, walk us through the toy design process. What do they send you to start with? How detailed are the instructions you get? And
pretty. Well, again, it's changed in years. Years ago, especially the old school product managers, they were pretty organized and they were pretty detailed, and they would send you almost like a packet. Hey, we want you to design this play set for these characters, and it's going to be based on it. And they would give you a lot of information. They would also give you a lot of time. So now it's dramatically different, where you can get almost nothing sometimes. It depends what you're working on. If it's a license you're familiar with, a lot of times the company will call me and say, we're working on, it could be Dora the Explorer. Okay, I know Dora, I got reference. Is there anything new I should be aware of? They'll send you a style guide, or a link to a style guide. Often, it varies dramatically. If it's movie related, which is always fun, you're seeing pre-production stuff for a movie that's a year away from release, because the toy industry's gotta release their product to coincide with the film release. So, for instance, when the first Spider-Man movie came out, about a year before the release, we heard, so they're working on Spider-Man. We got some stuff from Toy Biz. They wanted me to do a goblin here, so I got to see photos from the set of Spider-Man, the Green Goblin, the Goblin Glider. This is, well in advance before anyone's seen anything, which is kind of neat. You get to see some stuff that no one else has seen. But, of course, you can't share it with anyone soon. So it's all confidential. But so they might send you some things like that, some photos, and they'll give you a broad idea of what they're looking for. If it revolves around the mechanism, they may have a breadboard model, which is simply a works-like model. It's not anything aesthetic. It's simply, hey, here's what this thing's going to do. You got to design a toy around it. So that could be the case. If they have a mechanism, sometimes they just send you a video. Hey, here's a video of how this mechanism works. Come up with toy ideas based on that. So, depending on how much information or how little information I get. Most of the time now it's less information. A lot of times I got to go, and if it's a licensed property I'm not familiar with, I got to get up to speed on it. So that's usually the first thing I do out of the gate is get some reference, gather some reference, get up to speed on the license, make sure I know the license. If it's a kid's show that I don't know, I got to go watch the show, learn the characters, go to websites, read up on it, you know. Then I talk to kids, like, you know, if I grab my daughter or grab some of her friends, and my nephews, ask them about it. You know, when I was working on Pokemon, the first Pokemon job I got, I never watched Pokemon. I was never into it, never followed it, didn't know anything about it, other than it's a bunch of little monsters that pop out in battle. So, Pokemon playsets to work on. The first thing I did is I started watching Pokemon episodes on YouTube. I grabbed my nephews, who were more than willing to tell me everything they knew about Pokemon, and I started to get up to speed on it, and then, you know, take that knowledge and start turning it into toy stuff. But usually, again, the company will kind of give you an idea of what they're looking for. Is it a play set? Is it a vehicle? Okay, you know, this is what we kind of want to focus on. Knock yourself out. I'll do some rough sketches, send them over. Hey, what do you think of this? You know, almost a little bit nicer than thumbnails. And then, you know, there might be a little back and forth. We like this. We don't like that. Make this bigger. Make that smaller. We got to hit this price point. Get some information, and then refine that sketch. The next stage, if they ask me to go to that, would be to make a nice color presentation rendering. So I would clean up the concept sketch and put together a nice rendering, like a beauty shot of what this thing's going to look like. What it, you know, you might have insets on there on your board that show what it does. Call it that out. Hey, it's got this, it's got that, it does this, it jumps around. You know. From there, if they move forward, and again, what they're using the color presentation art for will be to sell that concept into, number one, higher ups within the company to give the go-ahead for that product. They may also use those color boards for the buyers. Sometimes they'll have preliminary meetings with different buyers, whether it be Toys R Us or Walmart, and say, this is what we're working on, do you like it? And the buyers may have feedback and change it from there, but generally they'll get a gauge with those color boards from the higher-ups, the marketing guys, and then the buyers to kind of get the go-ahead to go to the next phase. From there, I would go to control art, which is blueprints, basically, turnaround drawings of a particular item. So, you know, front, top, side, back, cross sections even of the actual product at a 1-to-1 scale. Depending on how detailed or complex it is, you know, am I showing, you know, various aspects, pivot points, you know, different parts, pull things apart, you know, here are the different pieces, accessories, and I give them a set of control drawings. At that point, I'm usually pretty much done. They'll put it onto a model maker or a sculptor, depending on what it is. If it's a figure, usually that'll end up at a sculptor in a sculptor's hands. If it's something like a vehicle or a playset, you know, then you'll get like a model maker who will work right off of the drawings. He'll make that initial prototype model, and then they'll that will be where they go from. So that'll generally have the mechanisms. It'll have everything going on in it. It'll have everything aesthetically, and then a lot of times they'll work out some of those mechanical features if it has them. And then that prototype is factory. The factory will use that prototype. Well, sometimes what they'll do is they'll cast it. They'll make a casting. They'll use the casting and the prototype, the factory, and they'll use other castings for sales purposes. You know, they'll make a few castings of that prototype and paint it up, make it real pretty, and they'll use that. Say if they need to have a meeting with Toys R Us, they'll show that to Toys R Us. You know, hey, this isn't the finished model, but this is what it's going to look like. The factory will use the prototype and stuff to make their tools and start start the whole tooling process. And then, of course, then they start going into production. The company don't get test shots back. Do you guys know what a test shot is?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking toy terminology here. It's basically a product made from the production tools, but it's not cast in the right colors or painted or anything. It's basically whatever color plastic they have on hand. Hey, throw that in the injection mold in machine and run it out and see what it looks like. Then they'll send some test shots back, and that's check for various quality issues and make sure everything's right on the toy, whatever the product might be. If those test shots are approved, they'll go ahead and start, making production samples. And then obviously, if those production samples are approved, then they go full blown and start, making them, the full run. So, my work ends at all the 2D stages. Sometimes I'll do product label art, which are, the little stickers and deco that they'll actually put on the product. So, I've designed a lot of that stuff for play sets and vehicles and things like that, whatever it might be. And that's more like graphic design, but at the same time, it's going directly on the product, so you have to have a good sense of, make sure it works with the product and ties in correctly with the product.
So you finally get to have that graphic design degree that you worked enslaved over come into play.
Design skills and then put it on the toy. Yeah, exactly.
I have a question about, when I was looking through your portfolio, I noticed, some of the illustrations were a little bit more rendered than other ones, like, let's say your Star Wars ones, and I'm not sure if this is just because you're a Star Wars fan, but some of the, Star Wars sketches felt more rendered out than the other ones. Is that just, did they request that, or is that something that you just did on your own?
Are you referring to the Star Wars the villages, the Bradford stuff, or the action figure stuff?
I think it was I want to say that it was I saw a Millennium Falcon flying out, and the rocks below it were just there was a lot of details in the rocks, and I was like, wow, he took the time to go in there and render out those rocks, and I just was curious if that was something that they asked for, or if it's just something you felt like doing.
I'm sorry, those Star Wars designs were for Brad?
Yes.
Or for collectibles. So what they were having me do, they were designing these collectible pieces, like shelf pieces of different environments within the Star Wars universe. So those, they're looking for kind of finished concept sketches. They wanted nice, tight stuff. And when I worked with them, they rarely, if ever, had me go to control art. A lot of times they'll take my concept art and hand that right to the sculptors to run with. So they'll ask me for a nice, tight, clean line drawing of a various Star Wars exterior. And in that case, those were these spaceship scenes where we did one. It was the X-wing flying through a trench. And then there was another one, the Millennium Falcon flying out of the space slug on the asteroid in Empire Strikes Back. So yeah, those were very tight. Some of the other ones, the Star Wars Village collection was the Endor bunker, the Mos Eisley Cantina, the Hoth Rebel base. Those were very, very clean. The first few that were rendered in color were to sell the concept to Lucas to get the approval for them to do it. So they wanted nice, tight, clean renderings for that. Almost like a sales pitch, really. At that stage, they were trying to acquire the license and get the go-ahead to do those. Once they got the license and Lucas said, we like what you're doing, go for it. Everything I've done on the Star Wars stuff with them since then has been black and white. They didn't need me to go to color on any of that stuff. But, those drawings are a lot tighter for that reason, because there's no in-between stage. And this stuff, if you look at some of the Galactic Hero stuff for Hasbro, they just want quick concepts. They come up with some different playset concepts for these Galactic Heroes. What can you think of? And they just want me to throw ideas out. So they're not so concerned with everything being tight and nice and pretty and clean. They really just want to get multiple concepts thrown at them. The Brad stuff is a lot more meticulous. I'm working from reference. I go and pull movie stills for that stuff. I go through and take tons and tons of screen grabs from the films to work with. Anything I can get my hands on, because I know that those are for collectors. I want to be as accurate as I can. When I do those drawings, I set them up. I mean, I really, I kind of take my time on those and set them up as clearly as I can, as accurate as I can. So, it's kind of a different way to work on those than the toy stuff. Yeah, you're right. The toy stuff, a lot of the concept stuff is quick. It's quick. They want to see a lot of ideas. They want to see them fast, and then they figure, we'll get into making them pretty later. So, sometimes I'll get an action figure job where they say, we want to make Spider-Man action figures that a kid will play with in the tub or in the pool. We just want ideas. You don't have to make Spidey look pretty. We don't care that, it's a great drawing. We just want ideas. So at that point, I'm just cranking out lots of quick sketches. Oh, Spidey that can jump. Spidey that sticks to a wall. Spidey that swings on a web. Spidey that throws a missile. Different ideas, action features. So those drawings are down and dirty, basically. And I blow through them real fast. A dozen different concepts.
Nice. What's software do you use? Do you use Photoshop? Do you do a lot of hand drawings by hand, or is it a digital these days?
I'm finally all digital. Years ago, I was doing everything traditional. I had the big drafting table behind me, and I would draw on the board, bring it over here, scan it in, clean it up, and then work with that, in Photoshop or something. About a little over a year ago, I finally said I gotta really convert to doing things digitally. I'm just getting sick and tired of cleaning up scans, and I had the Wacom tablet, trying to save up for a Cintiq, but it's a little further away. But I really wanted to force myself to use the Wacom tablet daily. I wanted to basically go paperless. I really was just getting tired of that process. You draw something, you scan it, you clean it up, you realize, I need another piece. You go back to the board, you're drawing it, and I'm back and forth from my board to my computer. I was getting sick and tired of that. So I took my drafting table apart, stuck it in my attic, and said I'm going to force myself to use the Wacom and just do everything digitally from now on. I won't have the crutch, I won't have that drafting table behind me. So I use, for drawing and sketching, I use Sketchbook Pro. I find that to be a much better program to draw in. It's got some tools in there that Photoshop doesn't have that help you draw that you just can't replicate. There's an ellipse tool and a straight edge tool that give you a nice, natural, thick and thin line. But at the same time, you can draw nice circles and ellipses and things like that, and curved lines, that you can't quite do in Photoshop. You're doing it freehand in Photoshop. When I used to draw, traditionally, I used a lot of templates and things, ellipse templates. You're drawing a wheel. You want to make that wheel look right in perspective, and you want the hub to look right, and you want the wheel well to look right. So you're using ellipse templates. That's just the way I learned how to draw. Because, you're drawing for a product, even though it's two-dimensional, you're trying to make that realization as a three-dimensional product. So it's got to look like a product when you're drawing it on paper. And even though you might only be seeing one side of that toy or one area of that toy, I'm always thinking through the whole toy when I'm drawing it. I'm thinking through, okay, what's the back of this thing going to be like? How big is this? So again, it's a little bit mechanical in a sense, the way you're drawing things, but again, I use a lot of, straight edges and French curves and ellipse templates when I would draw. And when I got on to the computer, you couldn't do that in Photoshop. You couldn't do it easily. You couldn't get a nice natural line on an ellipse in Photoshop. And then I found Sketchbook Pro, and that kind of solved that issue. Plus, Sketchbook Pro and Photoshop work real well together. You can, work in layers and then open those files up in Photoshop and see the layers. So I'll generally do my my drawings in Photoshop. I'm sorry, in Sketchbook, and then finish them up in Photoshop. Whether it's throwing a little rendering on, or a little grayscale or something like that, or throw some color in there. I'll finish it up in Photoshop. If I'm doing control art, if it's geometric and mechanical, I'll use Illustrator because I haven't had time to learn a 3D program. So for control drawings, I generally use Illustrator. If it's something that's organic, like a figure, and I'm doing a turnaround on a figure, I'll still do that in Sketchbook, and then kind of finish it up in Photoshop, clean it up. So pretty much those three, I would say primarily Sketchbook, Photoshop, Illustrator. Those are the ones I'm using pretty much on a daily basis.
Now, in the 20-plus years you've worked for a number of licenses that we mentioned earlier, are there any ones in particular that you enjoy more than the others?
There were some lines that were fun. I mean, they didn't even feel like work. The Simpsons, I would say The Simpsons, when I worked on that stuff with Playmates Toys, that was a blast. When I started, I was at Goldman Toy Group at that point. They had called us to do their pitch to Fox to get the license, and so I did the boards for the pitch for Playmates Toys. Excuse me. They got the license, and while we worked on the pitch, I was a huge Simpsons fan, and they knew that I knew quite a bit about the show, the characters, everything. So they called us back. They said, "We got the license. We want you to start designing play sets." So that was when they were doing the World of Springfield figure line, and they were interactive with the play sets. So we ended up doing a lot of play sets, and that transition went from while I was at Goldman Toy Group to when I went solo, and I maintained that work as freelance, and I ended up doing about close to 40 play sets for that action figure line. Well, I wouldn't call them action figures, but it was a figure line. And it was a blast because, they would say, we want to do this set. I would say, all right, well, I need this episode, and this episode. That's where that's featured primarily. They would call Fox. Fox would send me, at the time, videotapes, and I would watch Simpsons to get reference because there really wasn't a whole lot of reference to draw upon. But I remember a buddy of mine calling me up one day and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm watching Simpsons." He says, "Well, get to work." I said, "I am working." So I was getting paid to watch The Simpsons, which was fantastic. And then I would draw the sets up, the environments, and it never felt like work. It was a blast to work on. Again, I was a fan of the show. And then while I was working on the sets, I found a big collector site, which was the Simpsons Collector Sector guys. And I started talking with the guys on the forums. And when they realized that I was the guy that was designing toys that they were collecting, they were ecstatic. So we had this ongoing rapport, which was fantastic because I was getting feedback from the guys who were buying this stuff and what they liked and what they didn't like. And I would ask them, what do you like, what don't you like? Tell me so I can make these toys better. And Playmates Toys did thing, which was really credit to them. They would talk directly to these guys and say, "Hey, what do you want to see next? We want to make you guys happy. Tell us what you want to see." And so they opened a direct line with these guys and had them do polls, right? And they got a lot of feedback that really helped change their marketing strategy on what they were releasing. And then the line was successful for a little over 4 years, which was amazing. For a figure line, it was pretty amazing. So that was a ton of fun. The Simpsons stuff was great. Early on, like I said, when I was at Scrambled Eggs, working on the Marvel stuff was a blast. Because again, I'm a huge comic book fan, and here I am drawing Spider-Man play sets and Spider-Man toys, and that was it was like a fish in water. So it was fantastic. Star Wars, getting to work on a lot of Star Wars product. I worked on some toys as well as the collectibles with the Bradford Exchange. Ton of fun, just going through and really taking all that knowledge of Star Wars and the hundreds of books I have and reference that I have and putting it to use was great. So, it's always nice to work on lines that you know in and out.
Yeah.
Someone calls you up and says, do you need any reference? No, I got it. I'm fine. Especially when you have more reference than they can provide you with. So, yeah, that's a blast. Any of those type of toy lines you get to work on that you're really into from out of the gate is a lot of fun. So, again, even right now though, the stuff I'm working on with a client in the UK, it's non-licensed based, but he's given me free rein to draw what I want to draw. Hey, what do you think this should look like? So I'm finally getting a lot of those opportunities to, kind of spread out and say, hey, how about this? How about that? How about this? And I'm just throwing different drawings back at him to see what works, what doesn't work, and it's a lot of fun. So that's been a good time too. So as a departure, licensed stuff is in this case the non-licensed stuff. And he's got drawing all kinds of crazy stuff like robots and spaceships and tanks, and, all kinds of fun stuff. So again, that stuff comes naturally or more naturally to me than some of the other different types of toys that I've worked on.
Oh, that's cool. Now, I noticed you mentioned earlier that when you first started in the industry, they used to give you a lot of reference and a lot of time. And now it's like they give you hardly any reference or information in very little time. What would you say are some of the other more significant changes you've seen in the industry in your past 20 years of working?
Again, when I see that's client to client. Everyone's a little different on how they work. And again, sometimes a company might call me up and they haven't been given much time. They may have just come out of a marketing meeting and they were told, hey, we need a sketch on this and we need it, in 2 days. So I'll get that urgent phone call. Oh my gosh, we need a play set for so-and-so and we need it in 2 days. Can you turn this around? So in that case, I can't fault that product manager for not being fully prepared like they want to be, only because they haven't been given any time to prepare. It's, so sometimes it's seat of the pants and it's nobody's fault. But as far as a change in the industry, again, Toy Fair has been a big change, just as far as how you meet new clients and connect with people. That's changed. But then again, Toy Fair isn't what it used to be, but the internet has filled that void to a large degree, or even a better degree, to be able to meet and network with people that you wouldn't normally meet, or maybe have an opportunity once a year to meet. So that there's a change there where a lot of that networking and kind of meet and greet is happening through various networking sites.
It probably helps a lot for research as well. It sounds like they used to have to mail you stuff all the time, and now you're probably just, they tell you the name of something, and you probably just type it in and find out all the information you want to know.
Google, hey, I have a filing cabinet where I, used to collect catalogs from the toy companies. You'd go to the showrooms at Toy Fair, and, your best way to get information on new toys was to get a catalog. And if you're lucky, the company would give you one. If they saw your badge and it said you were a designer or an inventor, they would be a little hesitant. You're like, you guy, you're going to steal our ideas. So a lot of times I had to finagle a catalog or sweet talk someone into giving me a catalog. But I had this filing cabinet that's got this huge catalog collection of toy catalogs that I don't find myself using now. I'm online finding information on toys. Like I said, Google, I go to eBay if I'm looking for photos of a particular toy that's hard to find. Obviously the manufacturer sites, but I usually find better reference images just doing a Google search and digging around. The manufacturer sites don't always have the best photos, or at least the best usable photos. They're kind of low res or something like that. So, but the internet's fantastic. To be able to get that information so quickly and so readily, and from various angles, whatever, you can get it so easily. Even sending work. Years ago, I used to do my control art. I had to run to a blueprint shop and get blueprints made, and then I had to pack that up in a tube and run the FedEx and send that off. Now, I just hit email. Here's the file. They email it to them. They email it to the factory, and it happens instantaneously. There's no more, well, they got to wait 2 days to get the FedEx, and then Hong Kong has to wait a couple days to get the FedEx. It's not like that anymore. So the time frames have all ramped up, and I think a lot of it is, because of technology. And we were talking about earlier with the economy shift has really affected the toy industry the past few years in the way companies are kind of moving forward. You see a lot of hesitation, obviously, and that's across the board. Companies a little conservative. I'm not quite sure. Hey, they're starting to step up more recently, but what I saw happen over the few years when the economy really took a notice was a lot of guys were getting laid off. Those guys who can't find a job enter the freelance pool because they figure, well, I got to do something. Let me freelance until I land another job. So you got a lot more freelancers out there you're competing with. And then to compound that problem, companies were cutting back on the number of items they were producing. So one product manager in particular told me, he said, normally I might have 12 projects on my plate to dole work out to various freelancers. Now I have 5 projects on my plate, and that seems to be the norm. So there was less work going out to more freelancers. So companies were using that to their advantage, and understandably so. They were looking for good prices on design, and they were looking for fast turnaround. So that seemed to be a little bit of a trend that I noticed there for a bit, where companies were calling last minute and they wanted it next morning, or they wanted it over the weekend, and they wanted it for a lot less. So that was tough. That was a little tough to weather. Hopefully things will get back on track. It's like the feeling I got this year, things started to turn around. At least for me, things were turning around quite a bit this past year, which was good. Hopefully the moving forward, hopefully that's the way things will go. So, but it's definitely, there are younger product managers and things like that. So things happen at a little bit of a faster pace. So.
What advice would you give to somebody that wants to get into the toy industry?
In what regard? What do you mean?
With let's say with what do you think they need to have in their portfolio, or examples of to show someone that they're capable of doing that sort of work?
That's I would say obviously you want to show a little bit of a range. Portfolios are you want to show a good sampling, but you don't want to show too much. Some people make the mistake of putting everything in there, and I would say if it's not good, don't put it in. If you have 12 pieces and only 6 of them are really good, just put the 6 in. But at the same time, you do want to show a range. It's always nice for a toy company to say, hey, he can do soft stuff, he can do edgier stuff, he can do, I would say if you can show a little bit of that start to finish process of okay, here's the concept, here's more of a presentation, here's a turnaround, and show that understanding of how a toy gets made. Some of the mistakes I see are turnarounds, especially where things don't line up. You have a front view to a side view to a back view, and things aren't lining up. When things don't line up, the sculptor says, what am I doing? And then they start to question, and then you got them guessing. And if they're guessing, something's going to not turn out right. So, control art, I think you see various types of control art. I'm always a real stickler on everything being where it's supposed to be. And you'll see that a lot of guys who do a figure turnaround, they approach it almost like an animator. An animator, they're just drawing that character to look good from every angle. They're not necessarily saying, well, the tip of the nose is here on the front view, and the tip of the nose has got to be here on the side view. those are the things that I think people overlook, those kind of attention to detail things. But you want to show that you understand that stuff. You want to show that you understand how a toy's going to get made. I think that's a big problem, too, is people draw something that looks good, but it's too expensive to mold and make. You got to understand how something's going to get pulled out of a mold, and make sure there are no undercuts. Make sure, hey, where's that parting line going to be? Where are we gonna split this piece? How am I going to attach this to it? Where's that stuff going to go? What's going on the inside is just as important as going on the outside. I'm no engineer at all, but I understand how a toy is going to be made, and you have to use that knowledge while you're drawing something up. You can draw something up that looks really cool, but if they can't make it inexpensively, it's not going to get made. It'll get thrown off the board. So it's got to look good, but they got to be able to make it. And with toys, everything's cheap. We got to make this less, make it less.
Mm-hmm.
So always cutting costs. The price of plastics going up, price of production in the factories, factory prices are going up. So how can we make these toys affordable? We've got to be smart about things, with the least amount of parts, the least amount of pieces, least amount of assembly. All that stuff affects the cost of the toy and what the cost is at the shelf. So if you can show a little bit of that understanding in a portfolio, I think that that'll go a long way. People see a range, see quality, and see, hey, he understands that. It's not just a pretty picture. This is something that I can manufacture, and I can sell it for $9.99 or $14.99, whatever that price point is. So that's a tricky part. And that's hard to learn. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you learn along the way, or I guess you learn from doing some things. But at least the school programs now, I'd hope they'd be teaching some of these kids about the various elements of manufacturing. Is it injection molded? Is it blow molded? Is it rotocast? That kind of stuff. Because there's different factors that come into play when you're talking about those different molding techniques.
Well, Chris, you have definitely given us a lot of information to process, definitely for us and for anyone that's interested in entering this industry. Luckily, now I would say that there are schools that offer degrees specifically for someone that wants to get into this industry, because like you were saying, you came into this where you really got to learn from the bottom up. And I would imagine nowadays a lot of companies really are kind of looking for somebody who already has a lot of what you were given the opportunity to learn over an extended period of time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, again, a lot of schools offer toy programs, which is fantastic. So kids are coming out of school with a lot of knowledge that I had to learn. It took me years to learn on the job, and a lot of trial and error. I wish those school programs had been available when I was in school. Again, I fell into toys by accident. I don't know if I would have signed up for them, but looking back now, in hindsight, I said, "Wow, geez, that'd be great if I could have, had a program like that offered to me." Even today, I always feel like there's some of that manufacturing, industrial design knowledge I don't have. And again, it's a lot of just picking people's brains. I was fortunate enough to work with some old school guys that designed toys that I played with, which was really kind of cool. And I got to pick their brains a bit and learn from them, which was really nice. So, again, just gathering information, picking people's minds, finding things. It's great. The internet offers a lot of information like that. And then finding people who've been around doing this for a while, you can, if you're able to get an opportunity to get some info from them, that definitely helps, because like I said, I learned everything on the job. It was really just trial and error, see what you can do. So I feel like I'm still learning every day, but I think another important aspect is to understand marketing toys, how toys are marketed, how they're sold, to understand that's a big part of it, because that marketing affects the design so much. You know, that you come up with a concept, you send it in, oh great, this looks good, but we got to sell it to this kid, this age, at this time of year, in this country, you know, and it gets difficult. You know, there's a lot of considerations from a marketing standpoint that affect how a toy will ultimately come out. You know, big toy companies, if they're running TV, they want a wow. You know, they're looking for something different because they got to run a TV ad, and they need to punch a kid in the face with that in 30 seconds or less. So, different elements that come into play there. So. It's tough. You know, I don't know. Again, I don't know what these programs teach in school. I get the feeling a lot of these kids come out of school and they got a good knowledge base under them. You know, so I have to stay ahead of them.
Well, let's just hope you can handle the storm of emails and things that you'll probably be getting once we post this podcast online. Because I would imagine that you're probably going to, you're a huge resource of information, and I imagine that you're going to get a lot of inquiries from people that are wondering about the industry and how to do and what to do. So is there a place or a specific place we can direct them to find out more about you and your work?
Yes, the best place would be my Coreflat page, where, you know, find me on coreflat.com. You know, I have my portfolio up there, so, you know, just pull me up on there. You type in toy design, I'll pop up on the list there. And, you know, there's a message. You can message me through there. I do get a lot of, every once in a while, I get some students who will contact me through there. They'll ask me for that kind of advice. I try my best to point them in the right direction, at least as best I can. It's difficult because, again, working for myself, I didn't just do this out of school, you know, as far as having my own business. I was fortunate that I had been working with companies for a while. I had established contacts and a bit of a client base, so that when I was thrown out onto my own, I kind of hit the ground with my, you know, feet and, you know, got up and running pretty quickly. It's tough. I can't imagine starting out freelance from scratch. You know, that pretty overwhelming at this stage, because it is a little tricky to get into. It's a very specialized area, and not only, you know, from what I do, you understand how's the toy made, how's the toy sold. You know, you have to study toys. You know, there's history of toys. You got to be aware of toys that are coming out now, but toys that came out last year and the year before, and 10 years ago, and 15 years ago, and 20 years ago. You know, because when you're talking to your product managers about toys, you can, oh yeah, that's like this. You know, yeah, I remember so and so made that. You know, so you have to be able to reference those things, and you have to know those things. So you have to study toys. You know, again, a lot of times I say, well, you know what? You want to know toys? You got a niece or a nephew or a kid? Get on the floor and play with them. You know, bust out the toys and play.
Yeah.
Kids will give you a really great perspective on a toy that you never dreamed of, because they'll play with your toy that you designed in a whole way that you didn't imagine, you know, and I'm always trying to put my mind in the kid. Okay, if I was a kid, what do I want to play with? How would this be cool to me? What do I think is cool about this? And that's how I always try to approach it. Where I'm working on a play set, what do I want in a play set? You know, because I remember being a kid, I remember the things that used to bug me about a toy, you know, like, man, this thing stinks, you know, I thought it stinks, you know. It didn't bother me when I was a kid was the scale. Everything was always out of scale. You know, you had your 3 3/4 inch action figure, but your play set of your vehicle wasn't in scale. You know, it was kind of scaled down, or it's a little chintzy, had a cardboard backdrop, and you're like, ugh, this is awful, you know. So that's why I'm like, I don't want a kid to get my toy and say this stinks. You know, I'm always thinking about that kid opening the package and busting this out and playing with it. You know, do you like it? And the only way to do that is to play with the toys. Get some nieces, nephews, your own kid, is whatever. Get on the floor and play. Watch them. You know, check them out. Go to the toy store. See what kids gravitate to in the toy store. You know, that's really a great education. You know, I've talked to people online who've bought toys that I made, and the first thing I asked them was, how was it? Was it okay? Did it stink? Did it fall apart? What happened? And they'll tell me. Some kids will tell me, I thought this was going to be neat. It didn't really work the way it was supposed to. Some of those things aren't my fault, but things I'm like, I really know. When I worked on the Simpsons stuff, I wanted to know, what don't you like? And I wanted to get that information from the consumer. Because if the consumer likes it, they're going to buy more. They buy more, the manufacturer's going to make more. They make more, they're going to call me to design more. So that's what I wanted. I want to make a product that the consumer wants to get. It's the goal. So, what do I think's cool? It's amazing, again, you watch the difference between girls and boys, how they play with the same toy. That's an education right there. I think some of the students coming out of these toy design programs, I get the sense that maybe they're not really analyzing that. They're not looking at kids. They're drawing something that looks nice, but what they think a kid will like, but they're not really saying, will a kid really dig this? They're not getting that firsthand information. So there's no better criticism than a kid's criticism on something. Tell you, sure, this stinks. But again, the best thing in the world, I'll never forget. Many years ago, I just started working on action figure stuff at Scrambled Eggs, and I had worked on these Primal Rage action figures. I was finding accessories and parts and pieces. Do you guys remember Primal Rage, that video game?
I remember I remember the game.
I made some action figures based on them, and I remember I was at a kid's birthday party at a bowling alley, and a couple lanes over was another birthday party with a bunch of kids. And I remember the kid opened this. I had no idea who this kid was. He was opening his gift stuff, and he got a Primal Rage action figure that I had worked on. And I'll never forget. He ripped through that package like you wouldn't believe. To rip that toy out, and him and his buddies were so jazzed about playing with it, and he chucked that package aside. And at that point, I had been doing packaging and a little product, and I said, I want to do product. I don't want to do packaging anymore.
That's awesome.
But he was playing with that toy, and it was a toy I worked on, and I was like, that's cool. He's digging that thing that I worked on. That's what I want to do. So I think that was one of those moments where you have me like, okay, now I know what I want to do and how I want to do it. So I said, I don't care about the package anymore. I just want to design the product.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being a part of our program and for passing on your information to us and our listeners. It's been a joy having you. I can't imagine anybody that listens to this podcast is going to come away with a lesson or two of things that they need to do to improve themselves and to establish a better place for themselves within the industry. You've given people a lot of knowledge and history and a lot of things to think about in terms of how they approach their work and their careers going forward. So thank you so much for being a part of our program.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm very flattered that you contacted me and asked me to do this. Again, I've had some people over the years inquire to me about tips and advice and things like that, but I've never had anyone approach me and say, hey, we want to interview you, So I really appreciate that, and to get an opportunity to share some of that knowledge, it's a blast. So I appreciate you guys having me on. It's been a lot of fun. So
okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Yes, thanks again. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this podcast. Be sure to come by our blog to find articles, interviews, and resources to help fuel your education and growth. You can find us at onceuponasketch.com, Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube.